Hey, have you seen projects or tasks in your company delayed because of communication problems? You probably have. I certainly have. But have you taken the time to do like a post-project debrief to understand the causes of these communication gaps? I struggle with that a little bit, and so during this last year's NECA convention, I sat down with Amanda King to talk over her thoughts on the best ways to improve communication between the field and the office at an electrical contractor. Amanda is a leadership coach and trainer for the electrical industry. In 2016, she began developing leadership training programs for NECA contractors. Amanda has a marked skill for connecting, engaging, and inspiring her audiences. As the owner of Wired Leadership, Amanda works exclusively with NECA contractors and their IBEW partners to increase productivity and profitability through training, coaching, and development. Welcome to Keeping the Lights On. I'm your host, Todd Reed, and on this show, I connect with the owners and pros who design, build, and maintain our electrical, communications, and industrial world as we explore the best ways forward. Hey, I have a quick ask for you. Can you take a moment to help our show grow by subscribing or following the show on your favorite podcast player and on YouTube? And maybe even taking a couple minutes to give it a 5-star rating and reviewing it on that favorite platform as well. That'd be awesome. All right. Thank you for that. Let's get into the show.
Well, so Amanda, we like to start out each episode with the meals that bring us together, because this is how you come to know people that you don't know, and the meals, breaking bread, as it were. So if I or one of the listeners were to visit you in your hometown, where might you take us, and why would you choose this place?
Wow. I would definitely take you to Pietro's. It's an Italian restaurant in Lodi, California.
Okay.
And my goodness, the food, the ambiance, it's just amazing.
Oh, wow. Awesome. What do you like to get there?
I usually start out with the meatballs.
Okay.
That's one of their greatest appetizers. I also like their chicken piccata. That's a winner. But you can't get a bad meal there.
Not gonna get bad.
Pietro's in Lodi.
Do you also get a dessert, or you
No, I don't usually order dessert.
load up on the main course and you're good?
Yeah, but they have everything. They have pizza, they have salads, all sorts of great pasta dishes. They're known for their lasagna too.
Yeah. All right. I got to visit Lido, right? Is that what you said? Lodi.
Lodi. Yes, Lodi, California.
Cool. Let's do it. And let's go to Pietro's. So, speaking of food, I've been watching The Bear lately. I'm catching up. It's a show on one of the streaming networks, right? About cooking and about a chef who owns a restaurant. And it's chaotic. It's fictional, but it's chaotic. But I think it illustrates the importance of clear intent and communications, which they don't always exhibit very well on that show, which is part of the drama.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about that show and talking to you, and I thought, construction is no different. It's kind of a chaotic business, right? Like
definitely.
like a restaurant. So, and we're clear communication and the strategy among all the players, because construction is not just the electrical contractors. Everyone knows that's listening to this. It's all the trades, the GC, the owner, and all that.
Yeah.
So, what is the state of communications between the electrical contractor office and the electrical contractor field team?
I would say that it varies by contractor for sure. I mean, I don't want to make a blanket statement.
Sure.
However, I think it needs work. Generally speaking, it needs improvement. And even though we've got access to more technology that tells us, it's going to make your life easier, you're going to be more efficient, it's going to help communication, I really do believe that sometimes technology is contributing to that gap because of the separation of the human. So you're dependent upon that form. Did you fill out that form? Did you see that email? As opposed to those face-to-face interactions that capture so much more.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you do. I mean, that's what much of this technology is all about. Like, you'll be better as a team, but sometimes, maybe not.
Yeah. So there's work to be done.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest impacts you're seeing that can be attributed to this communication gap between the office and the field?
Well, I feel like when you've got people working on the same project, sometimes it creates this false sense of harmony. It's like there's conflict, there are issues, but a lot goes unsaid. And the blame game comes into play, frustrations, and it just yields a loss of productivity on both sides when there's that struggle around communication. And I do believe everybody wants to do a good job, but we're just not setting people up for success because the system and the communication flow just isn't there.
So, I mean, construction, I don't know how long electrical contracting has been a thing, 150 plus years, right?
Yeah, a long time.
You'd think we'd have it figured out.
Oh, no.
So what are some of the other reasons, like why the gaps exist? Well, you mentioned technology, right? But that's just fairly relatively a new thing. So
Yeah. So when I think about the reasons these gaps exist, I think it ties into a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities,
okay,
and a lack of a system in place. And oftentimes a foreman can have one person as a project manager, and these are the rules. This is your role. And then you get another project manager and they PM a job in a different way. So it's this constant learning curve and, hey, what am I going to be responsible for now? And I just think that it doesn't help, with that trust. And it's just a lack of consistency with policies and procedures that really contribute to that gap.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking about even within the same contractor, not just going contractor to contractor. You're talking about within one contractor, you can have these gaps.
So you can imagine if we work for the same company, and I've even seen it on the same project, you got a PM and a foreman in the same trailer, and there's a breakdown of communication, and they're in the same trailer because there's so many things at play that separates us, and we have to be more intentional about it. So if we can struggle within an organization, absolutely across trades.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, you talked about the electronic, being a divide, but you're sitting like right next to each other and there's a problem.
Yeah,
That's
and
fascinating.
sometimes it's with, when there's conflict that's never been resolved.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I don't want to talk about it. And then there becomes this sense of avoidance or withholding information. It's really a slippery slope.
Right. Well, who likes conflict, right? Most of us are like, if I can get around it, I don't want to confront you about whatever it is that's bothering me. Again, we've been around a long time. There's, I think they know about a gap. I think that's probably a known thing. Maybe they don't know how to define it. But what do you think's been holding the industry back from bridging that gap? I mean,
yeah, I think company leaders spend so much time working in the business as opposed to working on the business.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of leaders are spread so thin. They're bidding jobs, they're winning jobs, and then they've got to get someone to run the jobs, and they're constantly chasing the next project that they're not taking the time to even evaluate what just went wrong here. We're just on to the next. Yeah. So I definitely think it has to do with not having the time or not placing the time to work on the business. I also think it happens similarly with training field leaders, because many of our foremen leaders in the field, they get placed in that position of leadership and they don't get any training to go with it ahead of time. And it's kind of the sink or swim program.
Yep.
And it's like, here are the drawings. Good luck.
Yeah.
And that gap, it just perpetuates. And that's something that's been in the industry for years. It's not just in a region. It's an industry-wide dilemma where these intentional decisions around training and talking about how are we going to communicate, how are we going to do business, I just think we've got a lot of work to do there.
Well, I mean, in our business, our main people on the front lines are our sales reps or our, customer service, whereas, they're electricians. Well, we're always trying to promote from within. I'm sure like contractors do.
Yeah.
But the thing we always talk about is just because you're a successful sales rep does not mean you're going to be a successful manager necessarily. Right. And the same here, electrical contractor. I mean, electrician doesn't necessarily mean a good foreman, but but some of it is just a lack of training sometimes. And I think that's what I'm hearing there.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a lack of training. And to your point, it happens all the time. This person is a great worker. They show up every day. Let's promote them.
Yeah.
And without giving them the tools for their tool belt.
Yeah. I saw an example of somebody one time, just to use kind of military terminology. They were a great sergeant, but they were promoted to a captain's role, and they weren't necessarily a captain type of position, where you're thinking broader strategy and stuff, but they are tactician. Man, they are going to get it done better than anybody. But and I thought, what an interesting kind of dynamic, because you want to promote, but maybe that's just not the right seat for them, right? And you can maybe find another one if they can't.
Yeah, and I think, too, that ties into identifying people's strengths and taking the time to know, hey, hey, what's their strong suit, and put them in a position where they can succeed, and giving them those tools that they need, to get the job done.
So we're doing this at the NECA convention in 2024, which is cool. So it's so fun to meet you in person and kind of do these interviews in person.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. And you're speaking at a couple said you had a really good session here right before she sat down here. So she spoke and then come right here. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
But I think you're talking about this subject here kind of generally, right? The communication gap.
Right.
And you have 10 ideas about how to start bridging that gap. Now, unfortunately, we don't have time to go over all 10, and you just spoke on it, so you probably don't want to do it again. But I wonder if we could maybe just spend a little bit of time focusing on a few of those 10, kind of picked out some of the ones that really stood out to me.
Okay.
So let's start out with SOPs, or standard operating procedures. And what role do those play in improved communication?
Yeah, it plays a huge role, Todd. Man, it's like when there's an absence of SOPs, the rules are constantly changing. Kind of like I mentioned a moment ago, it's like you've got this person who runs a project this way, you got this person that PMs a project this way, and it's constantly changing. So there's that learning curve because the processes are not well defined. They're not in writing a lot of times. And with 98% of NECA contractors being family owned, it's like we've got some small shops that maybe they don't feel like they have the bandwidth or the capacity to focus on that, but they're just trying to get the job done and they're playing the utility player. So it's really important to have procedures in place.
So can you, I don't know, what's an example of an SOP that you've seen work or that they would be a good one to implement? I mean, because they have a million procedures and a contractor. So what are a couple examples of?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about procedures, unfortunately, when you step into a role, these folks are not getting a manual to do their job.
Okay.
Just like a playbook. They're not given that. So anytime a company can create a foreman's manual around, let's say, documentation, this is the centralized location for all documentation to live, whether it's, with, and I'm not sure if I can say names of programs or not, but it's like,
sure,
if it's Bluebeam or Procore or SharePoint, it's like having a place for all documents to live, even the expectation around dailies, the foreman's dailies, where they're keeping a journal of the events that occur on the job. What is that process going to look like? Submitting RFIs, requests for information. What's that look like? In some cases, the field is writing the RFI and then handing it off to a project manager to polish it up. In other cases, it's like, nope, the PMs, we do all the RFIs. So just saying, hey, we're going to have clarity around these procedures that have to happen.
Why is there hesitancy to create those?
I don't know really what the true hesitancy is. I think it goes back to, in a lot of cases, people are working in the business and not working on the business. And in other cases, people are feeling like, hey, we've been doing it this way without all the paperwork and without the processes, and we've been successful. We've been in business for 20 years and we've done okay without it. So why now? So I do think some people are hesitant. They're hesitant to change.
Yeah. I mean, can putting those in add a little bit of burden or something? Is that what people are concerned about? It seems like it could be a little bit I just do it this way.
Yeah, I just think there's so many pieces to the puzzle. Yeah. And if you're not trained yourself, if you don't even know what's out there, you're probably going to be hesitant to implement something because it's just so daunting. But I love it that NECA does a great job with providing support and so many services that you could, figure out what's going to be a good fit for our company.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned 3 different software and there's a million different ones. So it's kind of choose one and really perfect it.
Yeah. And do your homework, right? Do your homework, check it out, do your research to see, does this software do what we need it to do? And something else that I would, just to chime in on this part around change. Some people just don't want to change. And I think our industry does a great job at placing change upon people.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we're going to do this and this is how you're going to do it from now on. But when you're looking at a software that, let's say, the field is going to use, why not like get a 30-day, 60-day trial and let one of your field people try it out and report back? Like, is this going to do what we need it to do, so they can champion the change as opposed to feel like they're shoving something else down my throat?
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely including the people using the software is key.
Yeah, 100%.
So that kind of leads me to my next question a little bit, talking about transparency. I love reading about company culture and how to improve that, and transparency comes up a lot. So, like being transparent about, hey, we're thinking about this software, instead of just like you said, hey, sorry, Amanda, we're putting this software, and you're like, wait, what? And so step back and transparently say, hey, we're thinking about this. Anyway, so let me ask you, because I think transparency is one of your ideas, right, for a thing. So what role does that play, in this bridging that gap?
Yeah, well, I believe that no one wants to fail. I don't think that people wake up in the morning thinking, how can I screw up today? How can I get myself fired today? Yeah. I really don't think people are waking up with that mindset. And with transparency comes trust. And that's what we need to bridge the gap. We need trust. And when I'm talking about transparency, a lot of times when I hear it from the field, it's about job budget information. It's like, are you being transparent with all the details with this job? And the truth of the matter is, our contractors, they want the field leaders to be intimately connected with that project more than anybody else, know it inside and out, but they limit their access to the information and they limit their time with the information. And even sometimes it's this sense of, are they holding something back? And like, what's the secret? What's the secret about this job budget information? So transparency, the way I see it, is you've got to give that information to the field so they can feel confident in the plans that they make around those budget numbers.
I feel like this is an obvious question, but I'll ask it anyway. Why is there that hesitancy to share information?
Well, I don't want to judge anybody or make a blanket statement. However, oftentimes some people believe that if you give the actual numbers, people will take the foot off the gas and they'll milk out all the numbers. It's like, oh, you've got 20,000 hours to do underground in building A. They're afraid they're going to use all those hours because there's no urgency. Yeah. So I think that part of it. I think the other part is around overhead and profit, that profit percentage. Like, companies don't want the employees to know, yeah, we're going to make X amount of dollars on this job. Yeah. So they keep those numbers close to the vest.
Yeah, that's something for an owner or management to overcome for sure in their mindset. Yeah, interesting. So another thing we want to talk about are job walks and site visits.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to think this happens. In fact, I semi-confidently say I think it happens a lot, right? I think they're out there walking job sites and all that stuff. So I was a little surprised to see this in your step, because well, they do this, certainly, don't they? But there must be some perspective that you can bring in, like, so why'd you add that as a step, as something that can be improved? Everything can be improved, but... Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, it varies across the board. And I've heard so many people tell me, you know what? I know my PM's busy, but I figured he'd visit the job site at some point. There's some people that have been on their job site for 10 months, 14 months, and they've never seen their project manager.
Okay.
So they're able to do so much remotely, they don't feel the need to walk the job. So clearly a lot of job walks are happening before the job gets underway, right? Let's take a look at where we work. Let's think about logistics. So sometimes there's a job walk early on, or if it's, required with the estimating process of it. But there's so many people that are just waiting to be supported by their project manager. And the other part of that, with not visiting the job site, change orders are being priced, and oftentimes not enough money being put on that change order because they're coming up with a price sight unseen. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does, actually. Yeah.
Like, not walking the job, but it'll probably cost us to do this when it's the field that is on site, up close and personal, and sometimes they're not even included in the conversations around change orders. So I do believe that, when those job sites have those visits and they're scheduled, that's another point. Not just to do the site visits, but a scheduled site visit. That means I'm going to plan there's going to be a plan in place, an agenda for that visit. So it's not like somebody's just popping up, oh, show me this, show me that. And oftentimes it ends up feeling like a disruption
Yeah.
to the job site when you got an unexpected visitor. And it's like, hey, you wanted me to come by, so here I am. But now you've disrupted the flow because this person is trying to lay out their employees to do their job. So with those scheduled site visits, I think it's perfect because concerns can be addressed, adequate support can be provided, figuring out what the field needs, more accurate change order pricing, like I said, and also it helps morale, to show appreciation to the crew. If you're going to show up, Mr. PM, for that scheduled visit, why not bring a few pizzas?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Right?
Food is always good.
Yes. We know how food lands with construction. It's a hit.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here, what's standing out to me most about this, and you brought this word up a couple of times, is intentionality in what you're doing and a purpose of, I think like the agenda and all that is huge. Because we in a lot of businesses, you'll have a thing like we want you to visit a customer occasionally or something. If you just kind of go, then nothing really happens. It's more like, oh, hey, how are you doing? I know, how's your family? It's like, okay, that's fine. But what's some intention? Like, what are you trying to achieve? And I think everyone's good with that. Like, I think people appreciate that there's some purpose to it, and not just kind of a, oh, great, here comes a manager, right? It's the whole thing, like, comes a boss, shape up. That's interesting. Yeah, I love the intentionality that you bring up a lot. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. So I read a lot of military history, kind of World War II era and all that, but there's always the concept of the mission debrief. And in fact, I interviewed a fighter pilot, and who was shot down over Afghanistan, and she talked a lot about leadership. It's her big thing she talks on, and the debrief was huge. It's huge in the military, right? So, and I think you talk about a debrief, right, in one of your steps. So what role is that playing? Like, what's your perspective on that and in the role of construction?
Oh, man. The debrief, lessons learned is paramount. It has to happen, and not enough companies are holding those debriefs / lessons learned meetings. A lot of foremen that I hear, they'll speak to me and they'll say, you know what, Amanda, I don't know how I'm doing in my job. I mean, they keep letting me run work. They haven't fired me, so I guess I'm doing okay. And that's all they know. So they don't get feedback on how they performed, right? Did they save hours with their underground or with their overhead? And there's just that gap. So that's one of the reasons why a debrief is so important, because you want to be able to give them that feedback. The other important aspect is lessons learned. You want to be able to capture the wins. Where did we succeed and do well? And where did the estimate fail us, right? Where did we lose money? So if you're not having lessons learned, you don't get to close that feedback loop to say, hey, here's how we estimated it. Here's how it all shook out. Here are wins. We made a lot of money in this area. How do we duplicate that on the next job? So you want to document those wins, and you also want to document where you lost, like where you lost dollars, but in actuality, it's a learning moment. So what's the lesson that we learned? How do we grow from it? And that's documented as well, because it ends up happening that a company will get another project that's very similar, and this new foreman is just going to do everything from scratch and bump their head and fall in the pit holes and all those things. But if you do the lessons learned and you document it, and these documents live somewhere, a foreman can say, hey, did we do an Amazon distribution center like a year ago? Can I take a look at those prints, and can I take a look at the lessons learned? Because it's going to be a similar project, and I want to be able to do a good job.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, it goes back to your SOPs, right? I mean, kind of having that as one of the steps in the thing when you get a new project.
Yeah.
Are there any lessons learned from a similar project, right?
Absolutely.
That's big. So, well, I would think a good data flow might also contribute to this, right? Like if I don't keep good data, I don't really know how to report on it besides my gut. Like, I don't know, it didn't really, which goes back to transparency.
Right.
So do you think, is that a hesitancy? Like, is the data good for each job, or like, I mean, how's that?
Data, that's how you call the right play. That's how you call the right play. And when we have people in a position of leadership, it's like, you're the coach. So if the coach is going to call the right next play, they've got to use that data to drive those decisions, because profit, think about it. decisions made in the field can make or break profit. And anytime we can have some data around, some empirical data, like how did we perform last time? Like how many widgety woos were we able to, order or to install? And having that documentation around it is significant.
Yeah, baseball's huge on stats. People, if you follow
yes.
baseball, it's a stat sport. Every sport is, but
Baseball's over the top.
Over the top. They're all making just like pitchers. Well, look at the good ones. Look at the data of like, I'm going to pitch against Amanda. She just, they know.
Oh, yeah.
On the weather, on the day, how she sit,
Yeah.
So that's interesting and I think not every contractor, 90% of contractors love sports of some kind or another, right?
Uh-huh.
I think maybe we could take that analogy and like apply that. They're using stats, but it's using the data, it's getting it. They're using those software.
Using it as a tool.
Yeah.
Using it as a tool.
There's probably some lack of understanding on how to use the data. Like our company, for example, we have, who knows how much data we have, bits of data, but how do you use that effectively, right? So that's why you hire people to help you do that.
Yes.
Interesting. I'm curious on the debrief. So what about honesty in that? Like if I screwed up, is something going to happen if I bring that up? Like, hey, you know what? I estimated this, or I told Amanda to do it this way and it didn't work out. It seems like that could be a challenge too.
Yeah, but I think it's about taking responsibility and ownership, but it's not about the blame game. And when you have structure to that debrief, everybody knows what we're going to be looking for. This is what we're measuring for the life of the project. So when you have a system in place, it removes all of that emotion of, oh, I'm being attacked. This is, I'm taking it personal. Nope, these are the metrics. These are the metrics. We're looking at labor install rates. These are the metrics. So when we tie it to the system, the structure, the policies, the procedures, and the identified metrics that we're going to be working within, that's where that accountability comes in.
Yeah, and I think they need to probably, and trust will have to be built. Like if you share something that you screwed up and there's no consequence, no consequence, meaning, there's like, you don't get in trouble. You're just like, hey, great, did you learn your lesson? Let's apply that. I think that'll be instill trust, right? Okay, well, I didn't get in trouble for messing that up.
Yeah.
Praise me because I said it and I improved. And you knew to improve.
Right, and that's really how we move forward. That's how we move forward. And I do believe people want to do a good job. And, back in the day, it was called a postmortem. Some people are still using that term, postmortem, which translates after death. It's like, who wants to go to an after death meeting?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Right. It literally sounds like, the project died. We're going to conduct an autopsy to see who killed the job. And nobody wants to go to a meeting like that. But if we say, hey, this is what we do on every job, not just the job that tanked, on every job, this is our project closeout, and we do a lessons learned. I think it's critical, it's important, and it's so, so valuable.
Yeah. You got me thinking there, like that pilot I interviewed, you drop rank at the door when you come into those. Because the private could have made a mistake, or the captain, the general, everyone speaks openly about things, and there's not going to be repercussions from me calling out Amanda, my boss, right? It's like, hey, because it's done in a matter of trust and honesty that I'm not attacking you.
Right.
So, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, unfortunately, we don't have time to go over all 10. These are great. I would love to sit here and talk about all 10.
Yeah.
But so I like to kind of bring it back around to you, Amanda, and refocus on the why of what we do. So I'm curious, what motivates you to do this, what you do day in and day out?
Yeah.
What keeps you excited and passionate about what you do?
Well, the number one reason is the field. It's the leaders in the field. And I feel like oftentimes they're forgotten about. It's like all the training and the opportunities that are made available. Sometimes the field just don't have access, and they're just figuring it out on their own. And like we spoke about earlier, a lot of foremen are placed in positions of leadership without any kind of formal training, leadership training or managerial training. It's the figure it out as you go program. So that's the number one reason that I do what I do, and why I love to do what I do, and I call it my heart's work. It's because I get to support the field, and they want connectivity, and I love being able to do that. So that's number one. Number two, the NECA contractors. there's so many good people doing great things,
Yeah.
and so many companies that genuinely care about their people. And not only do they care about their employees, I see a lot of NECA contractors who are willing to share and help another contractor who's struggling. For example, I've had companies come to me and say, hey, we've got a project coming up, and we're really thinking that eventually we're going to have to start using more prefab. And instead of, engaging a third party, maybe we can, build our own prefab shop and start figuring this thing out. Do you have a contractor that you trust does a great job with prefab, and they've done it for a long time and they know what they're doing? And I'll respond, I sure do. I'll set up an appointment. And that other contractor that's been doing prefab for 15 years says, yeah, let's set up an appointment. We'll walk them through the shop and let them see our prefab shop. Or, oh yeah, we're in the middle of doing a project for that same client. It's a national client. Here, we're in phase 1. You guys are, just wrapping up the bid process. Why don't they come over and walk our job? So the second reason is to see how NECA contractors support one another, even their competitors, when they can talk and have conversations about, best practices. I think that's huge. And then the final reason I'll share with you in terms of why I do what I do with such passion and heart. I recently learned that my grandfather, who I've never met, he passed away before I was born. He was an IBEW electrician.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I just found this out pretty recently. Past April, I got his ticket number from the international office. And it was just me, digging around, working on my family history, and found out that I have this connection.
It's in your blood.
It's in my blood.
That's crazy.
So that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. What a great way to cap this off. Thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on finding that's fun information to find out. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for taking some time out of this busy show.
Yeah.
Appreciate it here in lovely San Diego, and it's been great to have you on the show.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Well, that was my conversation with Amanda King, owner of Wired Leadership. You can connect with Amanda and what she's working on by heading to the links in the show notes. Hey, I would love to hear what you're doing to improve your office and field communications. Shoot me an email. Let me know at podcast@graybar.com. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. Thanks for listening to this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time.
So what advice would you give to 18-year-old Amanda?
Wow, that's a really good question. Thinking about back when I was 18, I think the advice that I would give would start with trust yourself. Trust yourself. I think a lot of us second guess or lack confidence, or we wonder, like, are we smart enough? Are we good enough? And that lack of confidence, when a lot of times it's our own little, we're our own worst critic, but it's that little voice inside that sometimes we give power to by entertaining it, like those negative thoughts. So it would be to trust yourself, and also to develop good habits in every area of your life. That's what I would, say as far as like your finances, your physical fitness, your nutrition. Just make good choices.
Yeah.